Okay, we're going to get started, everyone. It's nice to see all of you. Welcome to New York Law School. I am Anthony Crowell. I'm the Dean and President here and the Faculty Director of the Center for New York City Law, and it's a very exciting day for two reasons. First, just a few blocks away, the New York Liberty will come down the Canyon of Heroes to celebrate their historic championship. I expect our sports law students will not be showing up for school today. And for all of us, we have an opportunity to discuss 6 ballot proposals that New Yorkers will have to vote on in a few days. Basically, the championship game for ballot proposals. So today we are joined by 2 veteran public servants, State Senator Liz Krueger, who will discuss question 1, the Equal Rights Amendment, and Diane Savino, the Executive Director of the Charter Revision Commission, who will address questions 2 to 6. And that commission put forward these proposals and was formed by the mayor earlier this year. I want to give a special shout out to Ed Kiernan, who's counsel to the commission and an esteemed graduate of the school, and who follows in my footsteps in a number of ways, given that I served on 6 city charter commissions, either in lead staff roles or as a commission member, and was formerly known as a charter martyr. So I greatly appreciate that our Center for New York City and State Law has scheduled this program and is featuring these 2 very special guests. The public education and awareness campaign is a critical element of placing ballot proposals before the public and ensuring the public understands what they contain and what their impacts will be. And as a reminder, in-person early voting in the city begins just a few days away this Saturday, making the time of this program very important. I also want to thank Ross Sandler, the founding director of the Center for New York City and State Law, and who is the Samuel Seabury Professor of Law, and he will lead the program today. And the center is building on 30 years of a rich legacy that Ross built from the time he started at New York Law School, when we were known as the Center for New York City Law just until recently. And of course, I want to acknowledge Mrs. Alice Sandler, who's here, who has been a wonderful co-host of these breakfasts for all of those 30 years. Also want to thank Ben Max, the center's the center's executive editor and program director who organized this program, and my gratitude goes to the entire center team, including distinguished fellow and counsel Steve Lewis, our distinguished adjunct professor and senior fellow Jeff Weiss, who runs the Election, Census, and Redistricting Institute, Cityland editor Veronica Rose, and City Law Administrative Coordinator Rose White. So I hope all of you here today will join us for our next program on November 13th, which is co-sponsored by the Independent Budget Office that examines the 35-year legacy of the 1985 Charter Revision Commission that reshaped city government into its current state, and will be joined by many special speakers, including the comptroller and public advocate. Now I invite our founding director, Ross Sandler, up to the podium to lead the discussion. Ross.
Well, good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you all here too, and also thank our founding sponsors, Greenberg Traurig, Con Edison, and Verizon, and also the Gold Star contributors who have Gold Star on their label. Thank you so much for being a sponsor. Point of personal privilege, David Seifman is here. I'm old. I've been looking at my scrapbooks. David Seifman wrote so many insightful articles about the city government in the 1980s, 1990s. I wish you were back, and I want to make a public offer. We here at New York Law School, we have several publications. If you have a mind to go back and write some more about city government, we welcome it, and we welcome others who also can write about government. We need more reporters on local government. Today we have 2 exceptionally able civil servants, Senator Liz Krueger and former Senator Diane Savino, experts in government, long history in government, served in the U.S. and the state Senate, worked in city government, were union officials, have been around so long that I think that they are fixtures in our civic life here, and I'm delighted to here to talk about something that's so important, these propositions which don't get covered the way they ought to be, and we all of us can be educated and learn more about them and to benefit from their wisdom. This is especially important that the two of them are speaking. We are very fortunate to get people who know so much about them and have been with them and the creation of them. Both of them have worked long and hard. Liz Krueger in the State Senate for the EAR, and then Diane Savino in the Charter Revision Commission to work out important and relevant propositions for us to vote on. So what we're going to do is we're going to have first Senator Liz Krueger come up and speak about the ERA, and then Diane Savino, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments. We hope to have plenty of time for that. So let me bring up Senator Krueger first.
Thank you. Little shorter than Ross. I'll just adjust this. Good morning, everybody. Hi, I'm Liz Krueger. I'm a state senator in District 28, which used to be the east side of Manhattan, but now is pretty much everywhere except down here, which is great. So yes, for good or for bad, I was the lead sponsor on the Equal Rights Amendment. Took 5 years, started before anyone imagined the Supreme Court would go insane and counter Roe v. Wade and throw out our rights at the federal level. And obviously, since that happened with the Dodd's decision, the abortion-related issues within this proposal have really become front and center as we see states all over this country, 24 of them, either put limitations on abortion or completely ban it. There are people in the state who say, we have good abortion law. We don't need to worry about it being in our Constitution. And there's other protections. We're not sure we should have those in our Constitution. There's all kinds of hypothetical panic, and all it is hypothetical panic. But I will just point out that I served in the New York State Senate from 2002 until 2024, assuming I win in a couple of weeks. Well, but for going forward from 24. But for 17 of those years, I served in a Republican majority Senate. I don't know whether you guys get political here, but I was in a Republican majority Senate, many of those years with my friend Diane Savino here. And we couldn't get one bill passed for protection of abortion, contraception, sexuality. They weren't doing it. And they kept saying there's no problem here in New York. Women were dying in New York until we passed a new law in 2019 on our second day in power, the Reproductive Health Act, which I spent 10 years working on, by the way. They were dying because we had terrible law in New York State. We had the first law in the country for abortion rights pre the US Supreme Court decision 3 years earlier, but it was a terrible law. It was just a little sentence in our criminal code saying, sometimes abortion isn't illegal. There's a lot of lawyers in this room, right? That's not really a healthcare law at all. And so you would have hospitals all over the state, including major hospitals in this city, saying, you look at that law, and we think we could be liable to criminal charges if we would allow medical abortions within our operating rooms. And so women were having to travel to other states if they learned that they needed a later term abortion. And everybody who needs later term abortions, it's because of the viability of the fetus or the health of the woman. So when people say to me, as many people now are, we don't need this in our Constitution, we've got good law. Laws come and go. Laws can change with the flip of the wrong election decision at any given time, particularly a governor. We almost got an anti-choice governor 3 years ago in the state of New York. So we need this in our Constitution. We can't depend on legislators and the governor This is critical, and we certainly can't count on the federal government or the federal courts, as we're seeing. So why doesn't this Equal Rights Amendment just say, put abortion in the Constitution? Again, I started this effort 5 years ago before anybody was getting hysterical about abortion at the national level. And I've started it focusing on, we hadn't opened up for review that section of our Constitution since the 1930s. And the world had changed since the 1930s. And so when I was meeting with a group, very famous group, working on the federal Equal Rights Amendment, and I walked away going, oh my God, 50 years, and we can't even get the word woman in the federal Constitution. What a nightmare. I said, okay, we're not just doing women and abortion if we're opening up the state constitution. We're dealing with the broader issues of discrimination and equity that are not protected in our Constitution. And I started reaching out to constitutional attorneys, and I started reaching out to attorneys who spend their life in court cases around discrimination, housing discrimination, employment discrimination, gender discrimination. And they were telling me about all these court cases throughout the state of New York, courts that they were losing for the following reason. They would go in with their client, sure, their client was protected because there was a state law saying you can't discriminate against women in housing or women in employment or LGBT people in fill in the blank. And I was involved in passing lots of that legislation saying that. And they would explain, you get a bad judge. There are lots of bad judges. Do you guys talk about that here too? You get a bad judge and they go, well, yeah, it's a law, but it doesn't exist as a protection in the Constitution. The law isn't constitutional. You lose the case. And so people have been losing their cases in the state of New York for decades and decades and decades on rights we all think we have. We as legislators think we pass laws protecting them. But that's why constitutions are crucial, should not be taken lightly, and should be very carefully written and rewritten. And so this process took 5 years, talking to constitutional attorneys, talking to litigators, cross-checking the references and the precedents, because you're lawyers, so you know courts look at precedents. Well, if New York did this in 1975, we're not sure we want to make a different decision now. And so it took 5 years of maybe 100 meetings. And by the way, I'm not an attorney. I'm really not a constitutional attorney, and I'm constantly sitting there with Google using the thesaurus to even figure out what they're talking about. So we ended up with a broad, inclusive set of sentences that we believe do protect the rights of New Yorkers in our Constitution in a broad arena of areas, even though the language is quite short. The proposal would protect against unequal treatment based on ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, sex, including sexual orientation, gender identity, and pregnancy. It also protects against unequal treatment based on reproductive health care and autonomy. So people are saying, that's big words. That's very complicated. Why didn't you make it simpler? I wish I could have made it simpler, but I had all these constitutional attorneys saying, no, you can't write it that way. And by the way, how many of you sit there reading the Constitution any day of the week? None of it's simple English. None of it is you read a sentence. And it's cross-references other sections of the Constitution because it has to. So there are sections that don't match up with exactly one paragraph because it has to. So then you have to explain to people, no, this is really what it means. So we actually passed another law in the legislature during that 5-year period that said ballot language has to be simple English of no more than the 8th grade level. Because we knew ballot questions are often complicated for people to read and understand. We thought because of that law, we would have simple language on the ballot. We even drafted a variety of versions that met the legal standard, which was no higher than an 8th grade reading level. So we were like, okay, it's a little complicated, but we're going to have simple language on the ballot. I won't say we forgot about, but we couldn't cope with the fact that the Board of Election is its own set of problems and issues, but also is 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. And so they cancel each other out on lots of issues we should be dealing with election law. So they came up with a proposed language that frankly was terrible and was, by their own admission, at a grade 15 reading level, which is 3 years of college, not 8th grade reading level. And we're like, no, hello. And everybody sent in comments. I think they had more comments than they've ever had on anything they've dealt with. And 98% of the comments were, use the 8th grade reading level version. The Attorney General submitted her own language. She's the arbiter of these kinds of questions in New York State, constitutionality. So she said, no, here's the right language, and it's 8th grade reading level. You can do it. And everybody said, yes, that's great. And they didn't do it. Then we went to court and got a bad judge who said, I'm not dealing with this. So we have complicated language on the ballot, which is a pain in the ass. But so I'm trying to keep it simple. Flip the ballot. That's the first issue. People don't even realize 2 weeks out from the election that there's ballot questions on the back. They have to flip the ballot. They're busy. We're all busy. We're a little panicked about other things going on November 5th. I personally think if the biggest election goes wrong on November 5th, I'm packing up and heading to prison camp the next day because I think that's where he's sending me. So I got things on my mind too. The end of democracy and prison camp, and I'm too old for prison camp. I'm sorry, stop. I digress. It's not about Liz. A lot of you will be joining me at prison camp, by the way. So you just might want to pack up. Canada said they don't want us all. Sorry, unless you've got like legal status or family there, you've got a problem going to Canada. Although we might build a wall between New York and Canada, so maybe we can get assigned to the wall in the north. The weather's better than in the south. So that's what this proposition is about. Now, there's a lot of money going into an opposition campaign. And it's all about being anti-abortion. All the money for the opposition is coming from a select group of anti-abortion philanthropists. Can you be a philanthropist and be anti-abortion? I guess you can. It's your money. So, but they don't want to say we're doing this because we're anti-abortion, because they know actually from polling data, that doesn't work anywhere in the state of New York, right? The state of New York is a pro-choice state, regardless of party, regardless of geography. So what did they have to do? They had to come up with a whole bunch of hypotheticals that this would do. And they've done a couple of things that is actually right out of the playbook in every state in this nation that is challenging their abortion bans. They're not making it about abortion, the opposition. It's always about transgender children. They're terrifying. Poor kids, like what did they do to anyone? It's all about transgender children. They'll play on your kids' sports teams. They'll go to your kids' bathrooms. They will take away your parental, not they, their children, but others like me will take away your parental rights. Your child will go to school in the morning, a boy, and I'll send them back a girl at the end of the day. They actually say things like that. I'm like, I'm looking for reading, writing, and arithmetic in my schools. I'm not really sure we're going to force people into gender-changing medical care against the wishes of their parents. Now, none of this is possible because we passed this proposal. There are laws in the state of New York, and laws matter. Otherwise, what the hell have I been doing for 24 years of my life? So we already have rights on transgender people's care in New York State. It won't change the law whether you like it or don't like it. We already have very specific laws protecting parental rights in decisions with their children, like it or not. Those are the laws. I've even been told by the leader of the Republican Senate at a press conference last week that my proposition will legalize pedophilia. What? We have criminal laws against pedophilia. There's nothing in this proposition that legalizes pedophilia. And where's the logic of that? Because there's no age discrimination allowed in the Constitution if this proposal passes. That means a 40-year-old can date and rape a 12-year-old, but it would be age discrimination to do anything about it. I'm like, oh, please, people, are we serious? So I've just gotten to the point where I tell people, they start to say, I've heard this, I've heard this. I go, does it sound crazy? Yes, it sounds crazy. Then it is crazy. All right, but there's a lot of money. Oh, the newest TV ads, I think that started yesterday, was this proposition will allow legalization of all undocumented people in the state of New York, give them all government benefits and the right to vote. I'm like, wow, that's federal. Those are federal laws. Our Constitution can't supersede federal laws. I might not like federal immigration policy, but there's nothing that we can do in a New York State Constitution that supersedes the US Constitution. And so it's like, why are they doing that? Because that's also the national theme of the Trump campaign, that the migrants are destroying this country and New York. And so anything that they attach to it relates to migrants is suddenly something you have to vote against, which is also wrong on its face value, but has nothing to do with this proposition. So I'm hoping that you all will tell everyone you know, flip the ballot, vote yes, and don't listen to all this crap that is going to be continuing in the next 2 weeks to hit you through social media, TV. I don't know if they're doing mailings. Although I guess the good news is there's so many other insane commercials running now to the election that I think it will get lost at a certain level. And I watched the migrant hordes attacking commercial, and even I was like, what are they talking about? Is that related to Prop 1? So even watching it, you're not sure what the hell they're doing. So I'm glad when bad people spend their money badly, and I think that's what they're doing with this campaign, but it's actually panicking people. And again, lots of people don't realize they have to flip the ballot. And apparently if you live in Brooklyn or Queens, you're going to get two pieces of paper, both with backs. So you're sitting there. I live in Manhattan, so I don't have to deal with this, but Brooklyn, you're shaking your head yes, right? Brooklyn and Queens, it'll be 2 documents with backs and fronts. And so, and multilingual. And so the concept that everybody's going to understand when they get to vote, okay, now I have 2 documents. I have to remember to look at the front and the back. Why do I have so many documents? Is a problem. I'm supposed to shut up, but I do want to make one pitch for something related to what you're about to hear from. I'm not going to comment on 2 through 6 other than on voting no, but I am putting in a bill, I think it's being announced today, that will actually change the rules for New York City going forward with future charter commissions. Okay, there you go. Good. You can comment on it. So basically, you'd have to have 180 days for a commission to do its work involving public participation, hearings, people having a chance to see it, listen to it, think about it. 2, you could no longer use commissions just to knock other people's propositions off the ballot. So again, I'm not even that concerned about 2 through 6 because I think it's pretty much just the city of New York mayoral administration deciding they didn't like the propositions the council wanted to put on this ballot. And they knew, because other mayors have used this trick also, that if they put anything on the ballot, the council's propositions got bumped. And any people, citizens who decided through petition to get propositions on the ballot would also get bumped. And I personally think that's ridiculous. Put everybody's on if everybody's meets the correct standards. And then the bill also says, and if you actually end up with two propositions on the same ballot and they seem to conflict with each other, and they could, whoever gets the most votes wins. So that the public, the people, actually finally decide at the end of the day what changes they want in their charter. And I will reference, because David Seyffert's in the room, Rudy Giuliani used this because there was a ballot question, should we pay for Yankee Stadium? I know I was against it. And he didn't like that because he thought actually the people of New York would say, no, we don't want to pay for Yankee Stadium. And so he bumped the proposition question by putting his own props on the ballot. And so it's not just a new concept that mayors use this to some degree to knock their opposition out of opportunity to come to the people and ask them to decide. And I don't think whoever the future mayors are should get away with it either. So I'm hoping that I will be able to move my bill with Tony Simone as the assembly sponsor in the coming year. But no, it has absolutely nothing to do with these issues today and the vote on November 5th. And I've probably gone too long, but thank you so much for inviting me.
I now invite Diane Savino, but while she's coming up, I'd like to acknowledge Gail Brewer, who is here. Thank you for being here.
So before we start, first I want to thank everyone for coming this morning, this early in the morning. I found out the best time to come into Manhattan apparently is to leave Staten Island at 6:30 and you'll be here in 15 minutes flat, which of course got me here sitting across the street for an hour and a half waiting for everybody to start. I also want to acknowledge my colleague who I spent 18 years with in the Senate, and if Senator Krueger was going to be honest, she'd have to admit that she tried to recruit me to run for Senate in 2002 to run against Senator Markey, except I didn't live in the district. And then she came back in 2004 and convinced me to run in an open seat. And we served together for 18 years, and she's probably one of the most conscientious legislators I've ever encountered and worked with. And one of the smartest people I've ever met also. She knows more about the minutia of state government than most people and the state budget and just about anything else. So when she tells you she worked really hard on Prop 1 for 5 years, she's not exaggerating. It was an extraordinary effort on her part, and I think she's right. No one could have anticipated what was going to happen in Washington when she introduced it the first time. So here we are today to discuss the New York City Charter Revision Commission. I have a clicker here. We can have a PowerPoint. Before we start, though, I am not in the same position as Senator Krueger. I am not allowed to have an opinion on the ballot measures. I cannot tell you how to vote for them. I can only provide an educational experience here this morning to explain the Charter Revision Commission's work, how it started, what issues it brought up, what was the final decision. And I have with me today the General Counsel, Ed Kiernan. He may help at some point along the way, and Mark Heinrich, another one of our smart young attorneys. And by the way, none of us in public office would be any good without the smart young attorneys that have helped us along the years. So let's get into the issue of the Charter Revision Commission. Okay, so legal background. The New York City Charter and Municipal Home Rule Law, State Municipal Home Rule Law, allows for the creation of a Charter Revision Commission. It can be established by the mayor. It could be proposed by the city council. But in this instance, it was proposed by the mayor to examine the entire city charter, which is essentially the city's constitution, and to make recommendations after having heard from the public. And so, next slide. In May of this year, Mayor Adams, after having met with several constituency organizations who complained about particular issues, decided to create a Charter Revision Commission. He appointed to it 12 people. He named them. He named a chair, he named a vice chair, and a secretary, and then the rest of them. And I want to speak for 1 second on the Charter Revision members, because I have heard some pretty disparaging comments from people in this city who are supposed to be public servants of the highest order. People who serve on a Charter Revision Commission, and Anthony, you'll know this, you said you sat on how many? 6. They are all volunteers. They do this because they care about public service when they are called to do it. They have their own lives, they have their own jobs, they don't have to do it. And so it's one thing to criticize the appointing authority, but we really should refrain from attacking the integrity or the credibility of the people who give of their own time just because you may not like the product that they produce in the end. So I felt I had to say that because I've been very bothered by some of the commentary that I've seen coming from people who claim to be leaders in this city, and they really should stop doing that. But May 21st, the mayor named the Charter Revision Commission. Again, there's been some discussion that we did it because the council had introduced a bill. The council's bill was introduced days after that. But commission was established. Since then, 14 public meetings were held, 12 of which were public hearings. The first one and the last one are not open to the public. They can attend, but they can't participate. Over 750 New Yorkers attended across all the hearings. 240 people testified in person and on Zoom. And this was the first time a Charter Revision Commission was able to be held virtually as well as in person. Since the pandemic, Zoom has become part of everybody's life. And we now know that people like to stay home and participate virtually when the option is there. We see it happening in public meetings. We see it happening in community boards. We've seen it happening everywhere. It's a fact of life now. People like it. They're comfortable, and they prefer to do it sometimes. And also, they don't have to travel. But we held these hearings across all 5 boroughs. We did it in the daytime. We did it at nighttime. In fact, we did one right here in New York Law. As I said, 750 people attended. We received 2,300 written submissions. And on July 25th, the commission voted to adopt the 5 ballot proposals for the November 24th election. So we'll get into the questions now. Ballot question number 1 is about cleaning public property. And what did that mean? During the course of the hearings, we heard, oh, by the way, let me back up for 1 second. I personally invited every elected official in the city of New York to attend. We reached out to every agency to submit ideas to reform the charter to make their agency work better. We had several elected officials come and testify in person. All 5 borough presidents either did it personally or sent someone. We heard from council members, we heard from the public advocate, we heard from the speaker submitted testimony, and I think in our last public hearing at the Queens Public Library, about a dozen council members came personally and testified on the issues that were before them. And out of some of this, we took some of their ideas. One of the issues we heard from several council members was the challenge of keeping New York City's property clean. The charter speaks specifically to the areas of the city that the Department of Sanitation has jurisdiction over. And then there are other areas that are commonly referred to as no man's lands, where no agency has just jurisdiction over cleaning them. So out of that, we developed the question on cleaning public property. The next one, and this should be near and dear to your heart, Senator Krueger, on determining fiscal impact statements. Very similar to the way we do it in Albany. The fourth one is on more notice and time before votes on public safety legislation. The fifth one is on capital planning. The information that you will see in that when we get to that slide came directly from the Comptroller's office. And the sixth one is somewhat of what we call a charter cleanup. And it was around, we heard a lot of testimony on MWBEs and how to make the program more efficient so that more people are able to qualify for MWBE contracts in New York City. We heard from the film industry and the complicated problem that they face trying to get film permits. God bless you. And the last one was on the elimination of 2 duplicative boards that have been enshrined in the charter for a while. So let's just jump right into them. So as I started to say on sanitation, there are sections of the city that nobody has jurisdiction over. So this proposal would amend the city charter to expand and clarify that the Department of Sanitation's power to clean streets and other city property, and also to require disposal of waste in containers. You're all seeing that it's part of a very important initiative in the city to get garbage bags off the street, and so that we can reduce our rodent population, although apparently we're putting them all on birth control now. Who knows, maybe it'll work. And it would also allow for the expansion of the Department of Sanitation's authority over street vending. Right now, they have street vending authority. In the parks, they do not have authority. This would allow them to work alongside the NYPD, where they have concurrent jurisdiction on street vending, and also in the parks enforcement officers in parks. Voting yes will simply expand that sanitation's power to clean the streets and other property. Voting no leaves the law unchanged. But what would it mean? Again, it would allow for a cleaner city. Right now, the mayor really doesn't have the authority to send the Department of Sanitation into areas where it's not in their jurisdiction, even though he does it. If you all recall, 2 years ago, there was a big rally in Union Square Park where some person said he was going to give away Xboxes and like 100,000 kids showed up. They then trashed Union Square Park when they realized they weren't getting anything and left behind a god-awful mess. So we sent the Department of Sanitation in to help the Parks Department, but technically they're not supposed to do that. They don't have authority under the charter. In instances like this, it would allow the mayor to send sanitation in areas where he doesn't currently have the authority. It will not displace anybody or displace any jobs. It will not short the budget of the Parks Department. It will not change anything. It will just simply allow for the use of sanitation under circumstances like that. On additional estimates. The City Council right now has the responsibility of providing fiscal estimates to their members when they are considering laws that have an impact on the city budget, raising or spending. This would simply streamline the process by which they issue those fiscal estimates. So they would be produced sooner rather than later. And there would be more opportunity for not just the council members, but for the public also to analyze how much something costs. The idea behind this came out of listening to experts from like the Citizens Budget Commission and other fiscal watchdogs who said we should put more clarity into these things. The Charter Revision Commission examined the way the state legislature does it, and Senator Krueger can attest to this. Before a bill is allowed to move through committee to be voted on in the New York State legislature, it must be accompanied by a fiscal note. That fiscal note must be prepared by the agency that's affected and by the Division of Budget. The legislature doesn't produce its own fiscal notes, and they rely on those. This proposal does not go that far. It still says the City Council themselves, their finance division, produces that fiscal note. It can be accompanied by one and requested by one from the Office of Management and Budget. But if the OMB doesn't produce it soon enough, it doesn't prevent the council from moving forward. It doesn't stop them from spending money. It doesn't stop them from proposing laws that spend money. It just provides greater clarity in the time frame by which they can consider those things. If you vote yes, you get more clarity. You vote no, nothing changes. On to the issue of public safety legislation. If the mayor were here, he would tell you he heard from people. He goes around the city and he does town hall meetings, and he hears over and over about the impact of some laws that have been passed that have affect public safety, and how can we get more input on them. And so the Charter Revision Commission heard from several people across the 5 boroughs about how they wanted more say, more input on the types of laws that what they've determined impact public safety: the NYPD, the Fire Department, and the Department of Corrections. So what this bill would do, it would require additional notice and time before the City Council votes on laws respecting those agencies. And it would simply say the council would give 30 days notice before voting on public safety laws that impact those agencies. And during that 30 days, the mayor and/or commissioners could hold their own public hearing to take testimony from the voters of the city of New York as to whether or not they thought this was a good idea. That's all it does. It doesn't impede the council's ability to pass laws. It doesn't stop them. And in fact, the mayor has always had the ability to veto laws, and they have the ability to override the mayor. Happens every day. More often than not lately, but it happens. Yeah. No editorializing from this. Capital planning. This request actually came from the controller who came and testified. He offered us several ideas, but because the Charter Revision Commission was limited in its time, they couldn't take up all of the ideas of the controller, but they decided to take up what they thought was a smart idea. The proposal would amend the city charter to require more detail in the annual assessment of city facilities, mandate that facility needs inform capital planning, and update capital planning deadlines. And what would this mean? Simply that they would assess the cost of maintaining city facilities, infrastructure, and investments, and publish these assessments in their capital planning reports. Right now, they only have to do that for new, expanded, or decommissioned facilities. So this would expand it to all things. It's simply more transparency in the capital planning process. And the last one is what the Charter Revision Commission labeled somewhat of a charter cleanup. The charter itself is a hodgepodge of things. If you look at it and you read it, any of you who've spent any time, and I'm sure you would agree, Anthony, sometimes it doesn't make sense because things get added to it over the years. And so there were a few areas that they wanted to focus on, but I want to talk about the MWBE one first. Of all of the testimony the Charter Revision Commission took during the 12 public hearings, there were two areas that we heard from the most. One was on MWBEs. Many of them, by the way, the administration has expanded MWBE contracts to now 35% of the stated goal of the city of New York is 30%. We're at 35%. But there was still, depending on what agency you are dealing with, depending on the contract that you're bidding on, it could be numerous people that you have to engage with through the city of New York. And it's a very complicated, not streamlined process. One of the things the Charter Revision Commission wanted to do, and we were prohibited at this point, was to create a separate freestanding agency just for MWBEs. And after a lot of contemplation and thought and analysis by these smart attorneys here who help us, it was determined that now is not the time because there are many things that go into creating a public agency, including determining who's going to work there and who will represent them and how you get a budget line. So right now, they felt it was incredibly important, though, to acknowledge the challenges that MWBEs face. So within the charter, there's already a mayor's office of MWBEs, but the Office of Chief Diversity Officer is not enshrined in the charter. This question would enshrine that position in the charter so that they couldn't be removed, regardless of who the mayor is, the position would be there, as they pursue the idea in the future of potentially establishing a freestanding agency that just focuses on minority women business enterprises. The second thing was, under the charter right now, issuing film permits lies solely with the Commissioner of Small Business Services. And when it was originally contemplated, no one could have imagined the expansion of the film industry here in New York City long before the film tax credit that Senator Krueger hates, but we won't hold that against her. It's brought tremendous business into New York City. And having only the SBS commissioner, the ability, and he or she only can issue those film permits is an impediment to an industry that is growing and provides thousands of jobs in the city of New York. So this would transfer that responsibility from the Commissioner of the Small Business Services to the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, which really interacts with the film industry every day. And the last one was under a previous charter, I think it was during the Giuliani years, there was some concern about him, I don't know, hiding documents or records or destroying records. So there was a second Office of Archival Review that was created. So we actually have two of them. And they do the same thing. They're duplicative. It makes no sense. And so the commissioner herself came and said, it makes more sense to merge these two because they provide the exact same service. So those are the 6 questions. I just want to go over the timeline because, again, there's been some reporting that this was rushed and that there was not enough time for it. And I just want you to take a look at, you don't want to look at the Giuliani years, but if you look at the average timeline for a Charter Revision Commission, they are roughly 4 to 5 months. The big spike was in 2011 under Mayor Bloomberg, but the most recent one in 2018 under Mayor de Blasio was 4 months. Under Mayor Adams, 4 months. The Charter Revision, as I said, we held hearings everywhere. Oh, the 2018 one. So in 2018, in 4 months, that we held a Charter Revision Commission, same number of hearings, overhauled the city's campaign finance system to raise it to an 8-to-1 match, created the Civic Engagement Commission, and then there was a question about imposing term limits on community board members. We are held to certain statutory timelines pursuant to law changes in Albany in 2019 that talked about the length of time that we had to provide the questions to the Board of Elections. Prior law said you could do it 36 days before Election Day. Current law says 3 months. So we were once we were established, we were up against the clock because we had to have our work completed by August 5th in order to submit questions to the Board of Elections. And finally, even though, as Senator Krueger talked about, the 8th grade reading level for ballot questions, technically, we probably are not held to that, because the law that she referenced stated that the language requirements for ballot questions only apply to state constitutional amendments. But in an abundance of caution, we decided that we would comply with it as well. Different from the state, though, here, the Charter Revision Commission drafts the questions and the abstract and submits it to the Board of Elections. They don't do it. On a state constitutional amendment, as she pointed out, it is purely the Board of Elections, which is what led to the confusing language on the original draft. So that concludes the slideshow on the Charter Revision Commission. And as I said, I can't tell you how to vote for it. I know how I'm going to vote for it, but I am expressly prohibited. I can only do voter education. I cannot do voter advocacy. It's just the way it is. But I have opinions, and if you want to talk to me later, I'm more than happy to share them. But at that point, I think we're done, and I appreciate you guys paying attention, and and hopefully I'll be around to answer any questions.
Okay, we have open mic, and please come up, Senator Krueger, and both of you are here, and we have about 10 or 15 minutes, so let's keep them short if we can. Please start.
Okay, Lizzie K., regarding that bill you mentioned, what's the status?
The bill I talked about?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. So it won't be introduced until, we could pre-introduce it now, but we don't go back to vote on anything until January. So that would be the absolute earliest the legislature would even consider the bill. So it has nothing to do with this November election, which is 2 weeks from now.
Okay, well, thank you.
Next person.
Senator Krueger, still my senator, despite the fact that they hijacked me to a piece of Queens. We've been here before. In the 70s, we got an equal rights amendment for the New York State Constitution on the ballot. We thought we had it passed. I remember working for it, working to pass it as a member of Brooklyn Now. You've mentioned that there are a lot of ads coming our way opposed to Proposition 1. Where is the campaign for it?
Okay, so there is actually a coalition, the Coalition for the Equal Rights Amendment, and they have materials, they have a website, they are doing active rallies and door knocking and phone banking throughout the state of New York. I think there's a Harlem event, I want to say Saturday. We did one in Manhattan last Saturday. There's activities going on throughout the state, and I don't have their email memorized. I'm sorry. Maybe somebody in the audience can look it up since they have their phones. Then there's also the state party in its coordinated campaign for elections throughout the state, who've also been developing and distributing materials. We're outspent. Absolutely, we're outspent. But that doesn't ever bother me that much. I mean, when I was early campaigning for myself and I was told I could never win, I was outspent 10-1 and won anyway. So sometimes when you work hard and you're on the right side of the issue, it doesn't matter how much money they throw at you. But again, I want to reinforce, basically, all the funding is coming through anti-abortion fundraisers, not on any of the issues that they're talking about as their claim to why they're so opposed.
Hi, my name is Fran Gatellis, and I'm a psychologist, but I also happen to be part of the Halt Solitary campaign and the Jails Action Coalition. And we got a law passed in New York this last session, which will end the use of solitary confinement in the city jails. We had gotten a law passed, by the way, a few years ago for that on a state level, but the city Corrections Department simply is breaking the law by saying it doesn't apply to us because we don't call it that. They have other names for it. So language becomes very important. Now, the particular ballot issue then that is of reference. Oh, by the way, our city law was vetoed by the mayor, and then the veto was overridden by the city council. But the way the Proposition 4 is worded, it took us years to get these laws passed. The way Proposition 4 is worded is basically delaying and making it almost impossible to reform either the jail system or the police system here in this city. And so that means that the torture in the city jails will continue indefinitely because solitary confinement is torture, and police abuse will continue indefinitely while we give those agencies a chance to hold propaganda campaigns
May I
by
just ask you to
delaying it.
stop
So
there?
I want to ask
Bring.
why you're willing to set up a law system which will allow police abuse to continue, and why you are in favor of continuing to torture people.
So thank you for the question. I would not characterize the proposition that came about after listening to hundreds of people talk about how you can bring more clarity to laws that affect those agencies. It simply adds 30 days. That's it. The council can move on bills. Madam, let me finish the point. The council has the right pursuant to the rules of the city council, the way the legislature has their own rules and the way you move bills. Nothing changes there. It provides 30 more days. That's it.
Days in which the agencies
That's it. It's 30 days.
by holding their own hearings.
Yes, that's it.
You're out of order.
Okay.
You're out of order.
Thank you. I think we got the point, and I think I'm glad you brought it up. Now let's go on to the next speaker, please.
Yes, I'm Michael Myers. I'm president of the New York Civil Rights Coalition. My question is really a question of process, except for Liz's position, which I support. These propositions, where's the opposition? Where's the other side in a law school? We have a right, I think, to an obligation as a community of civic citizens to have both sides of an argument presented at a New York at a law school. I don't hear the opposition to all these things. Now, she says that she's not taking a position, but obviously she's taking a position. She supports it because she was on the commission. She was on the charter. Now, let's go on, and I didn't hear any word said about how these proposals were derived from the mayoral opposition to the city council's legislation on police abuse and misconduct. And that is an outrage. This is a reason to vote against all these things because the mayor acted improperly.
Okay, well, thank you, Michael. I think that, let me just respond briefly. This is typical of what we do here, which we give, this is not a debating society up here. We do expect to have comments like yours, and we thank you for them. Next.
Hi, I'm really confused about something you shared about Proposition 6, because that was prior to this morning, I thought a fairly benign, good government kind of proposition. But you said that this second archive board was set up because Mayor Giuliani was found to be deleting documents or getting rid of documents. And so it was set up as a check. And so why does it make good government sense to be merging those boards if one is supposed to be a check on the mayor's ability?
Because they do the same thing. They essentially do exact same thing. So instead of having two separate boards, which is the Archival Review Board and what's the other one called, Mark? Right. It's like the Archival Review Board and the Board of Archives. They do the exact same thing. And in fact, most of the people who are on it are not even employed. It's like they're appointees. So they would simply merge them so you would have one. You don't need two of them. The original change to the charter was to stop the mayor at the time from what someone thought he was going to do, and it just turned out not necessarily to be of any value. They do the exact same thing. It's like having two police departments. It doesn't serve any purpose. So you merge them together, they still do the exact same thing, they'll just do it under one instead of two.
Let me ask somebody, where can people find the report and read the exact, I mean, that's a good question, why?
We should have brought
And-
it with us.
And is there a report and
There is.
explanation that he can get?
There is. If you go to the New York City Charter Revisions Commission's website, you can see the entire transcript of what happened during the 12 public hearings. The entire there's a preliminary report is on the website, and the final report with the ballot questions, the abstracts, the explanation, the analysis, and you'll see the other issues that were raised during the Charter Revision Commission that we did not take up, but recommended potentially for a future Charter Revision Commission. I also failed to mention the second biggest issue we heard from people was a demand that we repeal the city's sanctuary city law. It came up over and over and over. Hundreds of people submitted testimony on that. The Charter Revision Commission obviously chose not to take up that question, but it was something that people in this city felt very passionately about across all 5 boroughs. But there is a lot of work that comes in that you just can't take up. You don't have the time.
Hi, my name is Alexandria Kennedy. I'm an alumnus of New York Law School. And I would like to raise a couple of issues as well relative to what Mike Myers mentioned. When you're a minority, particularly a female minority, with no particular access to finances, it's kind of difficult and when you're disenfranchised. So I thought the purpose of, let's say, affirmative action or equal protection is for people like me, because I cannot pay to be in a position to do X, Y, or Z is really the ultimate reality of it. So, for example, someone who's pregnant or a gay male, are those people then entitled to the same affirmative action and or equal protection under the first proposal with this enacted?
Thank you. So yes, it would build into our Constitution protection specifically for people with disabilities, for LGBT people, for women, because women isn't mentioned in the New York State Constitution. When you talk about for specific things, that is really a determination of, is there a court case showing that someone is being discriminated against on any of these issues in the context of any specific law or activity? So I can't really answer that.
I feel as if the reason the mayor is proposing 2 through 6 has something to do with, well, besides the sanitation one, which will disable a lot of buildings because the price is too high if you don't go in accordance with how they want you to dispose of the trash. When you have multi-buildings, that will be a major problem. At any rate, relative to number 6, I have direct factual information relative to Steven Spielberg as well as Spike Lee, without permit, videotaping disenfranchised and vulnerable people. And that is the reason for number 6. And I feel as I am being abused by that. And there has to be some specific mention of how I can be protected, because I honestly feel as if my brother told me this too. They're making up they're putting you in really uncomfortable situations and then taping you because you're a minority and getting paid for it and giving you nothing.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, ma'am, may I pass you by, because you already had a question, and take the 2 behind you, then you can get it, come back.
And I don't know how that relates to this.
Hi, my name is Claude Millman. I have 2 questions, both regarding MWBE, but the first having to do with the Proposition 1, the state proposition, which relates to, in New York City, we have MWBE contracts, but there's a preference for some of those contracts for some groups within MWBE over others. So, for example, if you're a woman but not another minority, and you're a contractor, then you have less priority, if you will, than other certain groups. And I was wondering whether the B section of Proposition 1 would give some help to those women-owned businesses that are not in any other minority group, who say that they should be treated equally among the other groups that are protected under the A section of Proposition 1.
It's an excellent question That probably would only be resolved through a legal challenge after Prop 1 passes, because I'm much more familiar with state MWBE than I am with chain differences with city. So I don't think we have that system within the state MWBE, but yes, with discrimination protections in our Constitution, it would apply to municipal laws. Now, if there's something specific to that within the charter question, I don't really know what they're trying to do
No.
with changing it in the charter.
So the
No.
charter question, I have
Okay, now I'll
a
give it
question
to you.
about the charter also, which is
Just-
a different question,
Mhm.
has to do with the diversity
Mhm.
officer. And I was just wondering whether, given the timing of things, there's been a lot in the media now about questions about whether high-level city officials were corruptly involved in city contracting. And, you know, putting aside the merits of that one way or another, I was wondering whether that is a greater concern with respect to a chief diversity officer for New York City, given that that officer would have a lot of sway over city contracts. And if you enshrine that in the Constitution, are there greater concerns in terms of corruption?
But there's always concerns in terms of corruption. We should all be concerned about corruption in government, right? We are the keepers of the public's money, no matter where you serve or who the elected officials are. Enshrining the chief diversity officer in the charter doesn't extend any additional responsibilities or obligations on his or her part. Those procurement rules are still in place in every agency. What it does do, it will create a doorway, a front door for people coming in, because what we heard over and over from people who are struggling MWBEs in this city trying to get access to government contracts, like everybody else did, is that it's an unnecessary hurdle. They have to go through too many doors. And this would open a doorway for them to work with, and that person would then be responsible for managing the interactions with other agencies. The procurement process does not change. It doesn't extend any greater authority to the chief diversity officer so that he or she can decide who gets contracts. None of that changes. And it's a pretty and if you speak to MWBEs in this city, they will tell you it's a pretty complicated process to get a contract. This is just an attempt to try and streamline it a little more and take a little less bureaucracy out of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for that. My name is Tim Hunter. I'm with the New York City Campaign Finance Board. We are a nonpartisan agency, so we have no opinion on any of these ballot proposals. I just want to use my quick second to say hello to Senator Savino and former Senator Savino, Executive Director Savino now, and Senator Liz Krueger, and also tell you guys about the voter guide that everyone should have on their table. So New York City Votes is an initiative of the Campaign Finance Board. It's our goal to kind of make elections fair and transparent for everyone. Not only do you have this amazing voter guide, how many people have got this in the mail already? Right, so I see a lot of hands going up. That's great. We also want to just let you know that this is also available online, right? So if you want to go on our website, you can take a look at all these ballot proposals. There's also been a number of comments, public comments that were submitted to the Campaign Finance Board. You can take a look at the organizations that have, voiced either support or oppose some of these ballot proposals. All of that is available on our website. You could also create your own ballot proposal list, so you can kind of like figure out in advance whether or not you're going to vote yes, yay, or nay on any of these proposals. We have an amazing set of resources where you can access voting rights, your rights as a voter. All of that is also in your paper voter guide as well. We don't have candidates in this packet this year, but next year I'm sure we'll have a lot of candidates in our voter guide. And I just wanted to say,
there are people who want to ask questions now.
Yeah.
And thank you.
I was going to end. I was just going to say thank you so much, Ben, for having us.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Now, Senator
Thank you.
Krueger tells me she has to leave very shortly. So let's keep it very quick, if you please.
This is not a speech.
Thank you.
Michelle D. Winfield. So I want to thank Senator Krueger and also the detailed presentation about the other proposals, because that's important. But there's opposition upstate for Prop 1. So my question is, why was it so many issues placed in Prop 1 when across the country that proposition was narrowed? Why did we do such a thing? Thank you very much.
Because we're the great state of New York and we're supposed to get the right protections into our Constitution. And frankly, you only deal with these issues about once every 100 years. And it took 50 years to still not be sure whether women are included in the US Constitution. So Michelle, you're right that people are getting confused, but mostly just because the opposition is inventing issues. In states that have propositions that just say abortion, the exact same media campaigns are running saying this will open it up to migrants. This will open it up to pedophiles. And there are states that go, our proposition just says abortion. What the hell are you talking about? So there's a national effort to try to spin false information about these propositions. So personally, we'd be facing the exact same response in New York at this time from the exact same people with the exact same funding streams, whether this proposition just said abortion or covers a broader universe of protections for us. So that's my response. Thank you.
Joan?
Thank you. Thank you for coming here and explaining. On Proposition 3, there's a proposal for additional cost estimates before a proposed city law can be heard. I was seriously wanting to know what is the current law in practice and what are the estimates that happen now? And I say that from the perspective of someone who could be working in a city agency, get a bill we hadn't heard of before, and we say, how are we going to pay for this? Where's the staff? Where's the money?
Right. So right now, the city charter and the rules of the city council speak to the process. A bill is introduced. The city council is required to provide a fiscal impact statement. And sometimes they do it ahead of time, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes it shows up on the day of the vote. And so what we're trying to do is inject a little bit more clarity into it. Again, we looked at the way the state does bills. I had some experience doing that. Bill can't move from committee to the finance committee to be voted on the floor unless it's accompanied by a fiscal note that is prepared by the agency that's affected and the division of budget. So there was some concern, we heard from council members, that that was a step too far, to giving the entire responsibility to the Office of Management and Budget would be unfair. And we took that into consideration. And if you are really wonks and you want to read all about this, you can go online to the Charter Revision's website and you can see preliminary report which talks about that and then how we changed it in the final report to reflect the commentary from council members and from their finance staff who came and testified. And they said, that's a step too far. And so we modified it and said, okay, it must be accompanied before a hearing, because a bill in the city council, before it can be moved to the floor, has to have a public hearing. And the public hearing consists of, okay, we're going to take it up in the committee today, and people come in, they're allowed to testify and not testify. And so it must be present before they move that bill forward then to the next stated council meeting, which is when they can vote on the bill. That's all it does.
Last
Okay,
opportunity.
I would like to ask something about Proposition 2, and that's the one which you simply say it involves cleaning the city. You don't tell that what's also involved is it's giving the sanitation department the right to give people tickets, to criminalize vendors, and to criminalize homeless people. And in doing so, it allows them to take the property of these people and throw it in the garbage, which is what cleaning the city means, and even destroy it. And sometimes the police are doing some of this now. So why you need the sanitation department to also be doing it doesn't make much sense to me. And why you're allowing them, say, for example, with homeless people, they take all the possessions and throw them in the garbage. And that can include somebody's legal papers, and it can include their birth certificates, includes other important documents.
Thank you.
Why
This is a
you
good
think
question.
that the
Let's get an answer.
sanitation department should be allowed to do this?
I can offer a response. I guess in part, I can't answer the last part of it. Right now, in the charter and in the Department of Sanitation, the charter already says there is a street vending unit in the Department of Sanitation. They have responsibility for enforcement of street vending. And that means people who are selling items that they do not have a license to sell in the city of New York. And that can be food, it can be souvenirs. It could be, probably they're selling those things today, the number one finger for the liberty, whatever. They have that currently. It's in the law. It's in the charter. It's in the law. What they don't have authority to do, oh, and by the way, so does the NYPD. They have concurrent authority to enforce vending laws in the city of New York and issue citations and take property if necessary. What sanitation doesn't have the authority to do is issue tickets or enforce vending laws inside New York City parks, which includes alongside Central Park or in places like that. This would extend their vending authority that they currently have in the charter to other areas where they don't currently have it.
Including
it.
becoming police.
Okay.
No,
Let me, I'm sorry, we're going to have to bring this to a close. I apologize, but time, we're over 15 minutes over.
Rashinda was my
Well,
constituent
then,
for 18 years.
let me just close this up and thank Senator Krueger. Thank you, Diane Savino. Thank you for the audience and thank you for the questions. I thought the questions were very good and very pointed, and I appreciate the fact that you stood up and asked them. Thank you so much. We'll see you at our next breakfast.
We crossed paths about